Most people don't think of strategy that way.
Developing a new strategy.
Strategic blind spots.
When strategy meets reality.
Strategy and innovations.
In the strategy world.
Drive their strategic goals.
And welcome back to Strategy Meets Reality podcast. Welcome back to the Strategy Meets Reality podcast. I'm your host, Mike Jones, and today I'm not joined by anyone. This is the 10th episode of season 2, so I thought I would come on and give my reflections, a bit about previous episodes that we've had, but also some things that are on my mind with strategy at the moment from recent experience of being at a conference recently and client work. The podcast, just a point, is doing really well. We're increasing in our viewership, which is great to see. So I appreciate everyone who takes their time to listen and engage with the podcast. And if there's anything you want me to cover that I haven't, or any particular focus, please just get in touch with me either on the LinkedIn platform that we put these on, or for anything really, email me. The emails are on everything. Just get in touch, and I'm more than happy to take those considerations in. And also, if you've got any ideas for guests that you think would be great on this show, please get in touch. I do get spammed a lot with agencies trying to force people on me, and they're never really a good fit. We're really focused. This is about strategy, about organisation and strategic leadership. So we need to really keep focused on those. So if you've got any great guests, please bring them forward to me. Update on the book. The book is going well. I've got first part out to beta readers. I think my beta readers will taking the time to give me feedback. I kind of underestimated the time for publishers. My fault. So probably be looking at sort of end of this year, maybe start of next year. But I'm hoping the end of this year will be good. I've got most of the book pretty much squared now. I'm just trying to titivate and really make sure that I'm not losing my voice in there, but also trying to remain respectful through that. So I'll let you know how that's getting on. But again, I'm constantly writing all the time. It's the joys of writing a book, I suppose. I've got loads of ideas that keep coming to me, some that will make it into the book, some don't. So I'm always writing articles, which I've always struggled with before. But I think just having all these great conversations all the time about strategy and writing and exploring it is just giving me loads of ideas and material that I can just translate into articles. So please have a look at those on my Substack or on my LinkedIn newsletter. That's pretty much all the updates. I hope everyone's had a great Easter break. So the episodes, this is number 10. So we've had 9 from season 2 already. And we've had some absolutely fantastic guests. I'm kicking off with Stephen Bungay, all through to Sarah Kernion, recent ones with Joel, really good one. They're all on there. So have a look. So what I wanted to do is reflect through what was the common thread for all these, because they all had their unique perspective. So I urge you to go listen. If you haven't listened to some of them, go listen, because all bring their unique perspective. And I like the way I run the podcast. You please feedback everything differently, but I like the way that it's not structured. We go into a conversation because it really emerges some really, really key insights and different perspectives. What I like, but the key thread that's happened for the 9 episodes is that their background seems to land on the same point, which is you understanding the situation you're in precedes everything else. I think this really goes back to some points I've made before, where I've really challenged about it. It's about reality first and aspiration second. You need to understand where you are. And Sarah more sharply put this. She said, you can't out-decide a misaligned orientation. And I really like the way Matt Finch goes deeper into the body about this. And he talks about the gut, the aesthetic perception that happens before rational thought kicks in. And Garen even brought this in about really looking beneath the surface. And Joel talked about the professionalization trap that creates false certainty. And all these are really pointing at the same thing around this must understand the situation. And I do find more increasingly that organizations go through this thing called organisational disassociation. What I mean by that is a cognitive trap. It becomes a dissonance between what I want reality to be and what actually reality is. And the problem is that when we have this disassociation, this gap starts to appear, it really erodes the sort of, I suppose, rational thought was that probably not the right word, but you miss what's actually afforded to you in the external environment. It's like me, if I was like going, I'm gonna go run a marathon tomorrow because I think I can, but in reality, the furthest I ran is to the fridge to get a Mars bar. It's not really afforded to me in that sense. It's not realistic for me to go there. And you see this because it's not realistic, organisations overstretch themselves. They go for these things, and I suppose it's the adage around this whole big audacious goals or this great ambition that they stretch for, but they haven't got the resources, the capability to go for it, and they then destabilize themselves. And this is where you create this cynicism between the senior leadership or the people making the strategy and the people that have to execute the strategy, because they're looking at it and going, well, that's freaking mental. Why are we going for that? We haven't got the ability to go for it. And they build up the cynicism, and they then they just respond to what they're going to respond anyway. And you get this fracture happening between, there is a strategy that's being played out. It just may not be the one that you think's getting played out. It's maybe not the one that you've espoused, the one that you've set on the slide decks and you've given the time in the town halls. It's probably not the one that's getting played out on the ground, because there's that disassociation, that difference between actually what's reality and what the organisation thinks it is and thinks it can do. Yeah, so I think that's a really key point that a lot of them brought into it, is that if your orientation's wrong, the quality of your decisions are irrelevant, because you're just solving the wrong problem faster. So I think there's a lot to be said about actually holding back and really challenging about the assumptions that you're making. Like, what is it that your organisation is actually good at? I'm not saying that in a negative sense that, it's all rubbish, but I think there's a lot to be said about organisations really owning what they're good at. I think too often, and I actually recently spoke about this in a chat ad with Johan Navari. We meet up occasionally and have a good chat. He's a great bloke, and he was on season 1. And we talked briefly about this, that organisations all seem to be always chasing for what they're not good at, and they try to close that gap rather than really understanding and probably celebrating and using what they actually are good at and maximising that. But this orientation thing is really crucial, that we must fight the perceived orthodoxy of what strategy always is. You know what it's like. You go into any sort of offsite and, really, really think about it. Go into these offsites, rarely do they stop and say, right, what is the current situation? What's the risk? What's the threats? What are we good at? What are the constraints that we have in? What are the enabling constraints that we have? What are we actually here for? And I mean this in the reality sense, not an aspirational sense that, we're here to save the world. We're not. We're here to freaking make shoes, or we're here to do this. Actually, in the reality sense, like, what are we here for? What outcomes have we been trying to achieve? They don't tend to do that. They tend to go straight into what's our aspiration, where do we want to win at? What's our big goal that we want to go for? What's our vision? And they're looking ahead all the time, but they're not then thinking about where they currently are, what the ground they're on. Like when I was talking to Eric Sean, he was talking about, you start with the observation and terrain. You must think about that. And Lassie talks about, the hidden assumptions that form the invisible foundation for strategy. You must understand those things. You must understand where you are, what you're good at, all those things, the constraints that you're under. Because once you understand that, and I'm not saying remove ambition, of course we're going to, but ambition is grounded by where you are, not where you feel you need to be. You need to go from there, from where you are, and then you can start to see what is afforded to you. What's the trajectory you want to go to? So what's the next steps you can take? And then you take those steps. There's the next horizon. You can reorientate. Okay, we've done that. Okay, where do we need to go? Yeah, what small experiments do we need to take in place to understand what we need to do next and where we can go? So I think it really we can't underestimate the need for starting with reality, not a false sense of misguided aspiration. And I will get people challenge me about aspiration, because I think strategy has fallen into this trap where it's just all about dreams, and unfortunately it's not, from my perspective anyway. I'm up for a debate. From there, I think the other key thread was around that sort of the trust in communication and agency, but more about the interpretation. I've written about this quite a bit, about the interpretation, how important it is. David Tolley's entire episodes about how narrative and storytelling can shape how people receive and act on direction. And we saw similar things echo from Jason's episode around building that trust and how to transfer that that direction onto them. And again, same with Stephen Bungay. He took a lot from von Moltke and Mission Command. It's all about how do we give the directive, how do we tell them what to achieve and why, and not do the how. And that's quite hard for some leaders to fall into that trap and not give the how. But I think it's the key thing is the interpretation. I see it a lot when people have got a strategy, they've got direction, they spend, it's almost like a performance. They spend a lot of money. And the worst I've seen, and I don't know if I've shared this story on here before, worst I've seen, I was invited to a strategy launch. I wasn't part of the strategy, but I was invited because I was doing some other work. And they had a stage and all leaders, and the leaders came on, and there was like freaking like pyrotechnics going off and all this stuff. They stood up there and they talked about this so-called strategy, but it wasn't strategy. It was just marketing. It was just I don't know. I can't even explain what it is without getting angry. But it was just nonsense. But all it was is telling them. It was a pure amplify all this information to the people, and it was almost just then expected that they would automatically understand it and go off and start doing things. And I think that's where the breakdown happens, because there was no space at any point, really, apart from you get some people ask a question. Some of those questions are relevant or irrelevant. It don't matter, but they'll get some questions and they'll get some rehearsed party line back. But there's not genuine space to challenge. There's not genuine space for those people to look at it and think, okay, so what are they asking, and what does that mean in the context that I'm working in? I think context is key in that sense, and it doesn't happen. I think we create a strategy, we make a big song and dance, we do town halls, we amplify, and I think this is the problem. We amplify, we don't attenuate the communication, we amplify it out to everyone, and then we expect people to just understand it and deeply own it, which is not going to happen. Not in that sense, because they've not done the sort of cognitive work. Even come back to like what Matt Finch was going on about in his one. We haven't done that work to really process it and understand it, and what's that mean for their context. And I could be really cynical and say that most people will look at it and go, oh, okay, it's another nonsense vision statement and purpose statement. It doesn't mean nothing. So I can just go back and do what I was going to do anyway, and I could justify it because it's so vague. And I did have this with a client recently, given a strategy, and I said, well, it's probably not a strategy, but at least it gives you a sense of freedom. That thing is, because the strategy is so vague, you can pretty much do what you want anyway. You could justify it, which isn't great for an organisation to be in, but it's all too common. And I think this is a further deeper problem. I saw on some things someone sent me because they didn't like one of my articles. I can't remember which one it was, but they didn't like it because I think it went against a lot of what they're probably trying to sell. And they sent me this like list of 12 things that mean you've got a bad strategy or a disqualifier for strategy or some nonsense. It was a noddy list. It was honestly it was horrendous. It was stuff like vague strategy. Well, come on, wow. There's a lot of cognitive work must have been put into that list. But one of them that really stood out to me, was quite surprising, was that there was a thing saying, if the strategy doesn't involve everyone, it's not a strategy. That stuck with me for a little while, and I was reflecting on it. So if your strategy doesn't involve everyone, it's not strategy. Well, I think that's just absurd. That's an absurd statement. And I kind of get what they're on about in the thing. Well, I don't, but I kind of get it that, everyone should be involved in the strategy. But do they? But it's not, because you've always got in an organization, you've got this tension between status quo and change. In that's where strategies belong, because you've got parts of your organization that in the current ecosystem are just doing what they need to do, and they're doing that, and they're providing value to external environment as it currently is. We look at strategy, and strategy is all about how do we maintain viability. So looking at the changes. So they're bringing in things that, okay, for us to do this, we need to do this maneuver, which means this is going to affect or impact or take a requirement from, this part of the organization or this function, and so on. So it doesn't demand everything, because some strategies is going to demand either a capability change or new direction, focus thing, or or new focus from a part of a organization. It doesn't change everything. Like, just because you're doing a slightly different strategy, it doesn't mean it's going to fundamentally change what the accounts department are doing. It's not going to fundamentally change what some of your HR business partners are doing. It might impact sort of the interpretation of what, if there's any skills gaps, but there's not everyone's skills gaps. You're not suddenly changing everyone's capability in the organization all at once. So it's maybe the fact that you have the R&D function, they're not changing, they're still doing that, but maybe it's going to demand an increase or change in production. So this idea that everything's going to affect the whole organization is absurd. And I think this just comes back to the consensus reality of what people think strategy is about, where it's about this whole inspiring new thing. And because we're trying to involve everyone, it becomes so watered down, it means nothing. Like, honestly, most strategy, you pick your strategy up, and I've got a golden rule here. If your strategy looks like a Greek villa, i.e., you've got the purpose statement, the vision and pillars, it's not a strategy. It's probably most of the time absolute nonsense. And they're so vague that I could pick it up and just remove the name of that business and put something else in. They probably wouldn't tell the difference, because it's always going to be the same thing in there. Oh, we're going to delight our customers. We're going to, look after our people, or, develop our staff. And the other one would be improve our technology, probably more superfluous wording than I've used. Or now it would be AI superiority or something. But they're all generic with that, because I think we're not focused on strategy itself. We're just producing something. And this comes back to my point, and I've gone a long way around this, and apologies, around this whole idea of the interpretation. Because I think we need to worry less about the amplifying of communication. And I saw something the other day, someone, a good person, but they said, oh, you need to keep communicating your strategy. And yes, there is warrant to that. You do need to keep communicating what is the overall intent of the organization. I keep going intent, so it's the trajectory, what's the next horizon, what's our sort of logic behind our strategy. But that will only get you so far. What we need to do, and this is not a quick 5 minutes before the next meeting, this is a structurally enabled part where we give the intent to the function as in, and we give them space to understand the context, understand what's actually being asked for them. And at that point, that's good enough. So I understand the context, I understand what's asked, and it's not just surface level what's being asked. Really pull it apart and go, well, what is specified, what's implied in what they're asking? What are my freedoms? What are my constraints in that? And once you've really understood the context and where you are, you can back brief that and you back brief it and go, okay, this is my thinking. From what your intent is, this is what you're wanting from me. This is what I think is possible, and these are things. This is the direction I'm going to go with this. And it's a two-way conversation, and it's a bargaining. Well, if you want me to do this, I need this resource. We can't have that much. Okay, well, I need this. This is timelines. It's a bargaining. You're going to do it until you're aligned and the person has got that clear direction. But what you've enabled is that interpretation. They've taken it, they've interpreted it. And what Clausewitz talks about a lot in his work, we used to, was about that misinformation transfer. The fact that we are unique individuals, so we do perceive things at an individual level differently. But also, context matters, because if I'm in the sort of HR function, or if I'm in operations function, or I'm in this, I'm bringing a lot of different biases to this, a different perception. I'm seeing the organization from a different angle. So those words you're using are going to be interpreted slightly different. So we need to have that space, that interpretation. And I think we could do with less of the, and people with internal communications probably hate me in this, but we could do less with that stuff, because this amplifying noise. Well, actually, what we need to do get back is creating that actual space. So it's not a case of we develop this strategy, I'm going to amplify loads of noise at you about how great we're going to be, and all this sort of marketing crap that happens. I'm going to throw it over the wall, and then just hope that you're going to pick it up and do it, which tends not to. What you tend to see is people then just do what they need to do anyway, but they'll just post-rationalize it and justify it in their objectives that they've done that because of this, rather than what we need to do is develop strategy, give that direction, and enable that space for interpretation. Because as Joel talked about, strategy is about helping people make tough choices rather than telling them what to do. And that's what we're doing. We're enabling that. We're giving this is what I want. They go away and understand that. They back brief it. Then we're aligned. And the key thing is that because they've done that cognitive work, that as things change, as they inevitably do, they've got the foundations, a clear intent, they've got constraints, and they've got the right knowledge, skills, and experience, but they've done that cognitive work to understand it. They have all the framework in place so that as things change, they can adapt. They can adapt within the constraints and intent. So that speed of execution, that quality of execution is going to be far greater than rather we've just thrown it over the wall, and they don't have that. So everything stalls. They go into paralysis and they have to go to meetings. And then we start to see a big gap between the performance. So what we expected to happen versus what actually happened. And as Stafford Beer talks about, all this does is create pathological autopoiesis. So self-creating diseases in the organization, that all we do is because we've got a problem, because we can't sit with a problem to understand it, we knee-jerk reaction to want to solve it, that we start to create these new functions, these new teams to try and solve a problem. And all these new teams then become self-creating. They become bigger and bigger beasts that creates more bureaucracy, makes it harder for people to actually do their jobs, and just slows the whole organization down. And you see it a lot. And so a lot of this can be dealt with and held with, good interpretation. And that doesn't just stop that one time. It's a constant feedback around where we're going, what's happened, what's changed. And that really helps the organization, especially strategic leaders, because they can look as they're doing the relationship. They can see that, we've got the strategy as a hypothesis. We've got our parts of our organizations that are conducting the maneuvers. And as they conduct those maneuvers, they are interacting with the external environment. And this is where we're going to see, how well our hypothesis was, because we're going to decide, we act, and then we're going to look, we're going to feed that forward, and we're going to go, yes, that's people are reacting how we're expecting to do in the external environment, or there's not. If they're not, and actually, an actor's done something that we didn't expect, then we take that forward. We think, well, what does this mean to strategy? What direction do we need to give? We give that direction, and the organization adapts. And it's an ongoing process all the time of strategy execution. That's why they're so tightly coupled. You can't really spread them apart. It's really crucial we have this because strategy is not done. It never is done. We're just constantly trying to close the gap between hypotheses and surprise, which I think is a key one. So there was definitely those two key elements in there. But from all this and recent experience that I've had, I went to a conference and spoke about strategy. We're doing Pat's strategy, and Patrick Hofstad and Lucy Lowe's approach, which is really good. And we had Patrick on. I think he was the third guest of the first season. You want to listen to that. But and I've noticed through interactions with potential clients, mainly, I think my clients get it. Potential clients is that it's really questioned the paradigm or the worldview, that they're looking at strategy. Because I've always thought, it's a case of, I'm talking about this more dynamic approach to strategy, and maybe I need to communicate in a way. But I've started to realize that there's more underlying to this. And it really comes to the question, what is strategy for? And I think that's something that, as you're listening to this, to pause and maybe pause the podcast and sit with that question for a moment and think about what is strategy for. And this is something that has got me, and I think this is where the big challenge is, especially that I found speaking to potential clients. Because if you ask people, leaders, I think you'll get quite an obvious sort of lazy answer, which is, it's about goals, achieving ambitions, all this stuff. And yeah, they're a part of strategy. There are things within strategy to a point. But what is it for? Why do we do strategy? Why do we put vast amounts of effort in? Why do people, on my thing here, people have written loads of books about it that I've read. Some I like, I don't. But what is it for? And this is a challenge I have because I've looked at it in organizations, and I think there is two really concerning underlying premises for this, which is one is that it's an act of governance. So if you ask people what strategy for, it's almost as if it's a thing. We have to do it because you're not going to be a very good organization if you don't have a strategy. So it's almost less about we need strategy because the external environment is moving and we need to try and find a way to maintain viability. It's more the sense that we have to have strategy. It's part of a governance. If you've got a strategy, as a leader, you're doing a good job, and that's it. It doesn't really matter about is the strategy any good? Is it close to reality? Is it actually going to give the organization the direction it needs to be able to actually maintain the viability? That doesn't matter, but it's all about governance because we need something to show the board to tick off. We need something to justify a budget, even though most budgets are done by, what did we do last year, plus or minus 10%. And we need something to amplify out, to communicate out to people. So it's more of a thing we need to justify something, justify that we are, a good organization. Because God, if we had investors and we didn't have a strategy, we'd be seen as not a good organization. The same with the board. And then another thing that's tightly coupled with that is that strategy is for an external projection, externalized projection of what I want people to think about us as an organization. Not what we are. I want an external projection of virtue about what I want people to think that we are. And you see the crossover with marketing in this point. And this is where I've written a lot about marketing hijacking strategy. But if you sit with those two things for a moment, and they're both very tightly linked, that Why do people have strategy? What's it for in organization? I would argue the two prominent frames is that we must have one, because otherwise we wouldn't be seen as an effective organization if we didn't have one. So it comes into this idea that, or furthers this idea that strategy is just a product, an output, a thing, a good governance thing, rather than what it should be for. And the other one is that it's just a projection of what I want people to think about me. So we produce this thing to has an external projection that we give to our board, or even when we communicate it only internally, it still is written as an external projection of virtue. And I think that's quite dangerous, because that then leads into this whole thing about the performance, the theatre of strategy, rather than strategy being a useful activity. Not activity is probably words, you know what I mean? It's useful because it helps an organization in the pursuit of viability and advantage. Because you asked me what's it for, what's strategy for, and that's what I would say. I said strategy enables organizations the pursuit of viability and advantage. And what I mean by that is we know that the organization is in the midst of an external environment that has intelligent actors around it. It has a contextual environment around it, which is constantly changing. Be it, you can think about it as the political, economical, and definitely the political and economic ones are the ones that are challenging people the most at the moment with Iran and stuff. These things don't sit still. So your organization's fit with the external environment is going to erode over time if you don't respond to these things. That if you're not constantly looking and constantly orientating and adapting to changing circumstances. And this is what strategy is for. That enables you to do it, enables that space for you to do that constant orientation and adaptation so that you maintain viability. And viability, and I use the word viability because it goes beyond profits, it goes beyond that. It's about the ability of your organization to adapt without losing its coherence, its identity. And, in there, that obviously profits are important with that, but of course, but there is more to the viability of an organization than just that. And then advantage, you need to, because you have viability, but you need that advantage to sustain it over time, to give you stability, to then be able to adapt. Otherwise, you'll be constantly fighting all the time. And this is the challenge I have with people, because when I'm talking about strategy from my perspective, about what we spoke about across all these episodes and what I'm writing the book about, is a completely different perspective when people's worldview is set on the fact that, I just need strategy because it's a governance thing, or strategy is projection of what I want people to think of me, of the organization. Because then, I'm not going to work with people to produce a Greek villa in that sense, because it's not useful. I can't even work out in what context it is useful, other than maybe a bit of marketing. But marketing is a second order effect of strategy. It's not on level with it. It's a second order. It's a subordinate task to strategy. And that's why I always surprised, because you get a lot of these, marketing strategies and all this stuff. And I think they precede strategy. Unfortunately, I think that's where a lot of confusion happens. But when the paradigm is around that, that's concerning, because that doesn't really strike me as the perspective that will look to the external environment and orientate and adapt. It looks like, perspective, a whole theatre around how do we produce this lovely, shiny document that we can show around, we can put flashy lights around, and then hope that it will happen. And this is where I think we're talking about at the start, with that thread about the disassociation. And also with the theatre, that's what just builds cynicism in the organisation. And it creates a void, because in that void, you've got all these people that you've got a strategy that's so vague and opaque, and it is not relevant. It sounds nice, but it's just superfluous words that no doubt someone has spent vast amounts of energy and time justifying the use of inclusive or diverse, or or trying to think what they're going to be the best at in the world. And the priorities are all the same, pseudo priorities, and not priorities. They're just things. They're just noddy things, like, oh, we're going to have the best technology, or we're going to delight our customers. Just noddy. And then what happens? People feel the void in the thing. That's why we see an increase of people go, oh, I've got a people strategy. I've got a technology strategy. We've got an AI strategy. You've not got an AI strategy. You've not got a technology strategy. You've not got a people strategy. You have an interpretation of what the strategy is. And it's not saying that those things are important. Of course, they're important. They're an enabling factors for you to achieve the strategy. So it's not a case that, and the thing is, people had this argument. People go, well, I've got a sustainability strategy. You haven't got a sustainability strategy. You have you have a strategy. And if you want to understand if sustainability is taken seriously in your organization, you've got to then look at how that has informed the decisions or the choices of the strategy. Because that's what it's about. We all know it's an important thing. And I view it as a constraint, and not all constraints are bad. Some constraints are opportunities. So think about sustainability. There's this chef in the Dolomites, I forgot his name, but he's created this whole mountain to plates thing. So he's used this sustainability thing as an opportunity to create something really great, and it's really helped him. He's got, 3 Michelin star things. It's there, but it's not a strategy in itself. It's like Tesco's. Viability is always going to be mainly around selling things, but hopefully sustainability is shaping what they do in that sense, because they'll have choices. Of course, they can go do X, Y, and Z, but then that thing will shape. Well, we could do that, and it's probably cheaper, more far thing. But actually, if we're really serious about sustainability, that's not a choice, and we'll go this way. Same with safety. You can't afford, and if people, maybe it's a semantic problem, but if they want to call it strategy, can, but you can't let it fracture the organization. What they do, so their people strategy, their AI thing they want to do, I hate calling it strategy, but it really is that interpretation. What is the strategy? What's it mean in my context? And what I'm going to do about it. So if it is the technology department, whatever, they can look at it and go, well, actually, to enable us to do that, you need to utilize this, this, and this. And AI may be in there, and actually, it may help them, because a lot of the times people say, oh, we just need AI, Mike. What for? I know you probably do need it. It's helpful. It's helpful, but specifically what for? So I think a lot of this stems from this worldview. What is your worldview? And I think that's what I want people to think about from here, is thinking, what is your worldview? Think about it, pause for this. What is strategy for? What is your worldview on that? Especially if you're listening to this and you're a leader in an organization, look at your strategy. Look at the effort, the mechanisms that you've got to develop in your strategy, and really think about, what does this produce, and what is the predominant worldview about what strategy is for us. I think it'd be quite revealing. And like Joel said, we've got to be wary of this professionalization of strategy, that we create this mechanistic view of it, that it's just producing stuff because we have to produce something, rather than really thinking about what is strategy for, and what do we need it for this organization's viability and advantage. So, I think they're my reflections. I hope you found this good, but please, anything I said on here, please challenge me. I do like having a chat on here. Please put any questions, share with your networks. They get value from this. But these are just really the key things that I got from the 9 episodes so far. So that power is the orientation. We must start with the current situation first. As Sarah said, you can't out decide a poor orientation. And also that interpretation. Actually, are we just amplifying noise to our people, and using this communication warfare of just noise? Or are we actually stopping and enabling people to understand it from their context? What you're actually asking of them? Because that more likely will transfer actual one engagement, but also delivery, fast execution, adaptable execution. And then really thinking about, with all this theatre I keep seeing in organisations, what is strategy? What's it for? I think that's where I would like people to go away and think about from this episode. Is really think about what you've done in your organisation and what it's for. I find this useful. We've got some fantastic guests coming up. We've got a lot of really interesting guests coming on. But again, if there's anyone you think would be great for the show, please get in touch with me and I'll have a look at those and see if they're suitable for the show. But yeah, please, I really appreciate your support and I look forward to engaging with you all soon. So take care. Bye.